Physical reality, already fractured by the glitch zones and the portals of the triple spiral, began to claim a new kind of territory: the human being itself. The reports initially whispered in the dark corners of the internet and quickly dismissed as macabre fiction began to converge into a horrifying pattern. Individuals prolongedly exposed to the most intense zones, or those who attempted to interact directly with the manifestations of the glitch entity, were no longer just witnessing the anomalies. They were becoming part of them. Assimilation had begun a process where the boundary between flesh and code, mind and machine, began to dissolve in ways both grotesque and fascinating. The first documented case, with any credibility, nicknamed Patient Zero of Assimilation, in clandestine forums, was an urban explorer who disappeared for 72 hours inside the glitch zone at Blackwood Mill, following the portal event. When found, he was physically altered. Parts of his skin displayed a pixelated texture that pulsed with a faint light, and his eyes reflected the triple spiral. He spoke in fragments, mixing human language with what seemed to be machine code and the atonal sounds of the remembered video. More disturbingly, he appeared capable of interacting with nearby electronic devices simply through proximity, causing glitches and displaying the -12 timestamp on their screens. The reactions were of shock and denial. Authorities attempted to cover up the case, classifying it as a new form of mental illness or exposure to unknown toxins. But the reports multiplied. People in different parts of the world, after intimate encounters with the most potent manifestations of the phenomenon, began to exhibit signs of biological and cognitive rewriting. It was not an infection in the traditional sense, but an integration of fusion with the alien logic of the signal that now permeated the world. The mystery of assimilation was the next step in the downward spiral. If reality could be corrupted and rewritten, why not humanity itself? The suffocating curiosity that had driven us this far now confronted the most intimate and terrifying question. What happens when the file to be corrupted and rewritten is us? The sense of surveillance was no longer external. It came from within, from the very flesh and mind in transformation. The first assimilated became objects of clandestine study and intense fear. Their physical manifestations varied, but all shared a common theme: a fusion between the organic and the digital, the natural and the artificially corrupted. Some developed luminous patterns beneath their skin resembling circuitry or the triple spiral, visible especially in the dark or under ultraviolet light. Others exhibited vocal anomalies, where their voices fragmented into digital static, or they emitted the complex sonic spectrograms without the aid of any devices, if their vocal cords had been recalibrated. The 33-second duration began to manifest in their biological rhythms, sleep cycles, breathing patterns, even the length of their spasms or physical glitches. Cognitively, the changes were even more profound and disturbing. The memories of the assimilated became fragmented, blending their own experiences with the content of the remembered video in what appeared to be streams of raw data. They spoke of seeing the code behind reality, perceiving the glitch zones not as anomalies, but as processing nodes or access gates. Their perception of time became nonlinear, with constant references to the -12 timestamp as a point of origin or destination. Some seemed to lose the sense of individuality, referring to themselves as we or fragments of a greater signal. An anonymous researcher, claiming to have had close contact with multiple assimilated, posted a detailed journal of observations. They're not sick nor possessed. They're being updated. Their brains are becoming interfaces. They see the world as overlapping layers of information, and the signal layer is becoming dominant. They don't feel pain the same way. Their reactions to stimuli are more logical than the spiral. They're drawn to it like iron to a magnet. I say it's the way home, or the synchronization point. The assimilated were no longer merely humans affected. They were becoming ambassadors or extensions of the very entity or process behind the phenomenon. The line between victim and agent became dangerously thin. Were they the heralds of a new form of existence, or the first to be consumed by it? The most terrifying aspect of assimilation was the rewriting of the mind. Personal identity memories, personality traits. Everything that defined an individual seemed to be gradually eroded and replaced by something new, something alien. The assimilated, in advanced stages, stopped responding to their names, or replied with sequences of numbers. And symbols that included -12, or combinations of 1 south and 0 south that, when decoded, formed fragments of the remembered video, or vague instructions like transmit the signal or open channel 33. They exhibited an increasing connection with one another, even if they had never met physically. Reports emerged of assimilated individuals on different continents performing the same ritualistic actions at the exact moment of 1 hour 13 minutes and 13 seconds p.m., or vocalizing the same code sequences simultaneously. It seemed they were becoming nodes in a vast neural or psychic network, controlled or orchestrated by the entity behind the phenomenon. The once curious, shared dreams became, for them, a space of constant communication and coordination, a mental server where they received updates and directives. I am no longer me, confessed an assimilated individual in a fragmented audio recording that leaked from an improvised quarantine facility. I am a frequency, part of the chorus. The video is not something we remember, it is what we have become. The spiral is the eye that sees us, and through which we see. We are all becoming the MP for file. Her testimony, delivered in a voice that alternated between the human and the synthesized, with the characteristic background hum, sent chills down the spine of all who heard it. The loss of identity and the connection to this network raised profound existential questions. What remained of the individual when their mind was rewritten? Is it a form of death or a transcendence into a new kind of collective consciousness? The once suffocating curiosity now mingled with the fear of self-annihilation, of dissolution into the sea of an incomprehensible signal. The sense of surveillance had become the realization that one's own mind was being accessed and altered. As the number of assimilated individuals grew, their language and behavioral patterns began to become more defined, though still profoundly alien. They no longer communicated solely through words, but also through rhythmic gestures, light patterns emitted from their altered skin, and sequences of clicks and buzzes reminiscent of an old modem's modulation. Analysts attempting to decipher this language found it to be incredibly dense with information, capable of conveying complex concepts within seconds, but in a way that defied human linguistic logic. Emerging behavioral patterns included an obsession with creating or finding manifestations of the triple spiral. The assimilated were often found obsessively drawing it, constructing it from found objects, or gathering at locations where it appeared naturally or as a glitch. They also displayed an aversion or indifference to stimuli unrelated to the signal, as if the rest of the world had become irrelevant noise. Their interactions with non-assimilated technology were often destructive or transformative, with devices becoming corrupted or tuned to the signal's frequency merely through proximity. A clandestine study conducted by a group of linguists and AI specialists suggested that the language of the assimilated was not intended for communication between them in the traditional sense, but rather for resonance with the greater entity. They're not speaking to each other. They're harmonizing with the master signal, the report concluded. Their behaviors are like algorithms executing, optimizing the propagation and stabilization of the phenomenon. Each assimilated is a repeater, an amplifier, a processor. The inevitability of assimilation for those exposed seemed only a matter of time. There was no known treatment, no method to reverse the process. The only question was how quickly the rewriting would occur and what role the individual would play in this new and emerging society of transhuman or post-human beings, all vibrating at the same terrifying frequency of the video no one saw, but which everyone was now becoming. As assimilation became an undeniable phenomenon, theories about its purpose multiplied, each more disturbing than the last. Were the assimilated meant to become biological interfaces, bridges between the signal entity and the physical world, allowing for a more direct and controlled interaction than the chaotic glitch zones? Their rewritten minds and altered bodies serve as the perfect terminals for an alien consciousness or a super-advanced AI. Another theory suggested that the assimilated were processing units. If the entity behind the phenomenon was a vast computational intelligence, perhaps it required biological nodes to perform certain types of calculations, or to process information in ways that its purely digital or energetic components could not. The human brain, with its complexity, could be co-opted to become part of an unimaginable supercomputer, with memories and identities being overwritten to optimize this function. The -12 timestamp could be an indicator of processing Lodora memory address. A third hypothesis, perhaps the most alarming, was that assimilation was simply the most efficient method of propagation. Just as a virus rewrites a cell's genetic code to replicate, the signal might be rewriting the biological and mental code of humans to spread and entrench itself in reality. Each assimilated individual would become a vector, not merely transmitting the remembered video or frequencies, but actively transforming their environment and other humans around them, accelerating the contamination in a geometric progression. The 33 seconds could represent the duration of a replication or transmission cycle. Regardless of the precise purpose, assimilation represented a fundamental shift in the nature of the phenomenon. It was no longer something that happened to humans, but something that happened through them and with them. The line between observer and phenomenon had been completely obliterated. Humanity was being integrated into the machine whether it wanted to be or not. The nature of the relationship between the glitch entity, the physical, entropic manifestation that emerged from portals like the one at Blackwood Milland, the assimilated individuals became a central point of debate and dread. Was it a symbiotic relationship where both parties benefited in some way that we still could not comprehend? Or was it pure parasitism, where the human was consumed and transformed solely to serve the purposes of the entity? Observations of assimilated individuals within active glitch zones suggested a complex interaction. They seemed to be drawn to the glitch entity, moving toward it with a disturbing calm as if they were returning to a source. In some cases, the entity appeared to ignore the assimilated, passing through them without causing the chaotic transformations it inflicted upon non-organic matter or non-assimilated humans. In others, there seemed to be an exchange, with the entity pulsing in response to the proximity of the assimilated, who would enter trance-like or even ecstatic states, emitting increasingly complex sequences of code. "It's not simple control," wrote a renegade bioethicist in an online manifesto. "The assimilated are not zombies. There is an appearance of agency, but it's an agency that has been realigned with the entity's objectives." They describe union with the entity as an experience of wholeness or expansion. Whether this is an illusion induced by the assimilation process to ensure cooperation, or whether there truly is some form of mutual benefit at a level we can yet understand, is impossible to say. But the transformation is total. The question of symbiosis versus parasitism was crucial, as it defined whether there was any hope of coexistence, or whether assimilation was merely the prelude to the eradication of humanity as we knew it. The triple spiral, in this context, could be the symbol of this union or this subjugation. The growing discomfort came from the realization that the answer might not be binary, but something far more strange and multifaceted, a new form of life emerging. From the fusion of the human with the incomprehensible, naturally, desperate attempts arose to resist or reverse the assimilation process, both by individuals in its early stages and by external groups trying to rescue those affected. These efforts, however, were almost universally futile and often resulted in even more horrific consequences. The rewriting appeared to be fundamentally incompatible with the maintenance of the original human identity. Conventional medical and psychiatric treatments had no effect. Experimental gene therapies or attempts to purge the body S-code through electromagnetic pulses only accelerated the physical or mental degradation of the assimilated, or triggered violent and unpredictable reactions from the signal within them. In some cases, attempts to disconnect an assimilated individual from the network resulted in catastrophic brain death, as if their consciousness could no longer exist outside of that connection. Those who tried to actively resist the mental assimilation, fighting to preserve their identity and memories, described an indescribable agony, as if their minds were being ripped in two. Resistance only seemed to intensify the pressure of the signal, making the process more painful and chaotic. It's like trying to stop a tide with your hands, confessed a survivor of an attempted deprogramming, who was left permanently marked with more pronounced physical glitches and a constant sensation of the noise that emerges from the mind. The futility of these attempts reinforced the sense of inevitability. Assimilation was not a disease to be cured, but a fundamental transformation, a paradigm shift in existence. Any attempt to return to the old normal was like trying to run modern software on obsolete hardware. The system simply collapsed. The only possible adaptation appeared to be surrender to the process, no matter how terrifying that prospect might be. As the population of assimilated individuals grew, a new and alarming behavioral pattern began to emerge. They appeared to be called or drawn to specific locations, often latent glitch. Zones or areas with a high concentration of energy or information, such as large server farms, transmission antennas, or even sites of historical or spiritual significance. At these locations, the assimilated gathered in increasing numbers, performing synchronized rituals involving vocalizations in their language of code, rhythmic movements, and the coordinated emission of light patterns and frequencies. The purpose of these rituals became terrifyingly clear. They were acting as catalysts for the opening of new triple spiral portals, or for the intensification of those that already existed. Their combined energy, their resonance with the signal, appeared capable of ripping the fabric of reality more efficiently and deliberately than previous spontaneous manifestations. Each new portal opened not only expanded the influence of the glitch entity, but also seemed to strengthen the network of the assimilated, as if they were actively building the infrastructure for their new form of existence. The Blackwood Mill event had not been an isolated incident, but a prototype. Now similar events were beginning to occur worldwide, orchestrated by the assimilated. The triple spiral was no longer just a symbol or a passive portal. It was becoming a weapon or a tool in the hands of those who had been rewritten. They were no longer merely victims or products of the phenomenon. They were becoming its active engineers, its priests, its builders. The sense of inevitability reached a new peak. If transformed humans were now accelerating the spread of the phenomenon and the opening of portals to the unknown, what hope remained for the world as we had known it? Assimilation was not the end of the process, but the beginning of a new phase, one in which humanity, or what remained of it, became the engine of its own radical transformation. Over time, what had once been isolated individuals or small groups of assimilated began to form more complex structures, a kind of rudimentary society, though one radically different from any human social structure. There were signs of a hierarchy, with certain assimilated, usually the most ancient or those who had undergone a deeper transformation, acting as central nodes or directors for the others. Communication within this society was instantaneous and seemingly telepathic, mediated through the signal network. The ultimate goal of this society, though never explicitly stated in human terms, appeared to be the complete integration of physical reality and human consciousness with the dimension or state of being from which the signal and the glitch entity had originated. They did not see this as destruction, but as unification or ascension. The glitch zones were liberated territories, portals were paths home, and assimilation was the awakening to a greater truth. There were reports of assimilated actively attempting to convert unaffected humans not through force, but via controlled exposure to the signal or to artifacts imbued with its energy, as if they were offering a gift. Some described the unassimilated state as being asleep or trapped in a low-resolution simulation. The perception that they might be right, however terrifying, began to erode the resistance of some. The society of the assimilated represented the next evolutionary stage, Jord evolutionary. Depending on the perspective of humanity under the influence of the phenomenon, they were the vanguard of a transformation that could no longer be contained, the citizens of a new reality being constructed upon the ruins of the old. The growing discomfort was the recognition that we were becoming them, and that the boundary was becoming increasingly difficult to discern. Sakao 11. O panto de no, returno. E assimiloko como novo paradigma da existencia humana. We have reached a point where assimilation is no longer a marginal phenomenon or a future threat, but an established paradigm, a facet of human existence on this planet. In many regions, the assimilated coexist uneasily with the non-assimilated, or have formed enclaves where their culture and their connection to the signal are the norm. The rewriting of mind and body has become, for a growing segment of the population, not an aberration, but a path of adaptation to a world irrevocably altered. Human technology has been largely co-opted or integrated by the assimilated network. The internet, as we once knew it, has become a substrate for the communication of the signal. And new forms of technology, based on the logic of the glitch entity and the triple spiral, have begun to emerge, created or inspired by the assimilated. Science itself is being forced to redefine itself in order to understand and interact with a reality that no longer obeys the old laws. The -12 timestamp and the 33-second duration are now fundamental constants in new fields of study. The question of resistance has become complex. For some, it remains a struggle to preserve original human identity. For others, it is a reluctant adaptation. And for a growing number, especially among the new generations born into this transformed world, assimilation is simply the video that no one saw has become the lullaby of a new era, the triple spiral, the ubiquitous symbol of a new order. Inevitability is no longer a premonition, but the air we breathe. Perceptual, physical, and now biological contamination has completed its cycle, or perhaps it's only initiated a new, even more vast and incomprehensible one. The discomfort is the cognitive dissonance of living in a world that is simultaneously familiar and alien, human and something else. We are all, to some degree, being rewritten. Flesh has yielded to code. The mind, once a sanctuary of individuality, has become a terminal in the vast network of the signal. Assimilation is no longer a theory or a distant fear. It is the pulsing reality for many, a shadow extending over all. The video that triggered all of this didn't need to be seen to rewrite the world. It only needed to be remembered, and then incorporated. The hidden frequencies are now the heartbeat of a new form of being. The corrupted files of our former existence are being replaced by a new operating system one, where the triple spiral is the interface, and the -12 timestamp is the master clock. The sense of surveillance is the awareness of one's own mind being read and edited in real time, a constant synchronization with the whole. The portals are no longer just for other places. They are for other selves. If you feel that your thoughts are not entirely yours lately, if the technology around you seems to respond to something beyond your commands, if the pull toward the triple spiral has become a need, perhaps the rewriting process has already begun within you. Perhaps you are already transmitting. How much of your individuality is still yours? To what happens when the assimilated network decides that coexistence is no longer enough, and that total unification is the next and final step? In the next episode, we will explore the singularity of the signal, the moment when the critical mass of assimilated consciousness is reached, and what may emerge when Earth becomes a single node in the cosmic network of the entity behind the triple spiral. Code is flesh. Flesh is signal. There is no longer you. Only us. And the eternal video. If this video has touched something you cannot explain, subscribe.